Your modern SUV can get stranded by one dead sensor, a corroded connector, or a software glitch nobody can diagnose without a laptop. Meanwhile, decades-old Land Rovers with no computer to fail are still turning over every morning on farms, in war zones, and across deserts. These 7 models were built before electronics complicated everything, when durability meant thick metal, simple engines, and parts a farmer could fix with a spanner. Number 7. The Land Rover Series 1, 1948 to 1958. Britain came out of the war with a steel shortage and a surplus of leftover aircraft aluminum, so Rover's engineers built the body out of an aluminum alloy instead of steel. That decision, made purely to solve a supply problem, turned into the vehicle's greatest strength. Aluminum doesn't rust the way steel does, so while other post-war utility vehicles were dissolving into orange dust, Series 1 models kept working. The engine, gearbox, and axle were lifted straight from an existing Rover saloon car because there wasn't time or budget to design anything new from scratch. Nobody expected this stopgap export vehicle to last past a couple of production runs. It outlasted the company that built it in a sense. Land Rover eventually became the identity, not the side project. Farmers bought them because they could run a water pump, a saw, or a plow off the power takeoff and then drive to market the same afternoon. Decades later, Land Rover itself claimed that 70% of every vehicle it had ever built was still on the road. For a company that only planned to make this thing for 2 or 3 years, that's not a coincidence. That's a design accident nobody could repeat on purpose. Number 6. The Land Rover Series 2A, 1958 to 1971. By the time the Series 2A arrived, Land Rover had stopped treating durability as a happy accident and started engineering it on purpose. The bodywork stayed aluminum, the mechanical stayed simple, and the diesel option introduced in this generation was one of the first high-speed diesels built for road use anywhere in the world. Armies noticed, export markets noticed. The Series 2A became the default utility vehicle across former British colonies, expedition routes, and farms on every continent because it could be fixed with hand tools by someone who had never seen the inside of one before. There was no module to swap, no sensor to chase, no dealership required 1,000 miles from the nearest paved road. Owners who still run these today talk about the same thing, nothing complicated enough to break. A worn part gets replaced, not diagnosed. The Series 2A didn't need to be baby to survive 60 years. It needed an owner willing to turn a spanner every few thousand miles. That's a much lower bar than most vehicles from this era ever cleared, and it's why so many Series 2As are still doing real work instead of sitting in a museum. Number 5. The Land Rover 101 Forward Control, 1972 to 1978. This one was never sold to the public. The British Army needed a vehicle that could tow a field gun and carry a full ton of ammunition and equipment behind it, so Land Rover built the 101 specifically to survive that job and nothing else. The cab sat forward, over the engine, to keep the whole vehicle short enough to fit inside a transport aircraft. Power came from the same all-aluminum V8 fitted to the Range Rover, mated to a heavy-duty gearbox and axles built to take the strain of towing artillery. Just under 2,700 were ever built, almost every one of them for military service, which makes this one of the rarest entries on this list rather than the most common. What it lacked in numbers, it made up for in service life. The Army kept running these into the 1990s, 2 decades after the last one rolled off the line, because nothing about the design gave them a reason to stop. When the military finally retired them, private owners bought them up for overlanding because a vehicle engineered to survive a war zone tends to survive a green lane without much complaint. Number 4. The Range Rover Classic, 1970 to 1996. Land Rover took an aluminum V8 whose rights they'd acquired from an American manufacturer and built an entire vehicle around the idea that the engine should barely have to work for a living. That engine ran under stress for its whole 26-year production life, which is exactly why it held up. Combine that with permanent 4-wheel drive, a box-section steel chassis, and self-leveling coil suspension, and you get a vehicle that invented the idea of a luxury off-roader while still being mechanically closer to a tractor than a sports sedan underneath. The early two-door carbureted models are the ones enthusiasts trust most today because Land Rover hadn't yet layered on the electrical gadgets that later years introduced. Owners who keep the cooling system in check and change the oil on schedule report engines running well past the point where a modern luxury SUV would have already been scrapped for cost of repair. It's not a vehicle that forgives neglect, but treat it the way a working vehicle deserves to be treated, and the Range Rover Classic keeps proving that luxury and durability were never supposed to be opposites. Number 3, the Land Rover Discovery 1, 1989 to 1998. Land Rover needed something between the utilitarian Defender and the luxury Range Rover, so they built the Discovery on the Range Rover's own chassis and gave it the option of the 300 TDI diesel, an engine that would go on to earn a reputation as the most reliable diesel Land Rover ever built. Early Discoveries used fewer electronic systems than the models that followed them, which meant fewer things standing between a stranded owner and a roadside fix. That combination made the Discovery 1 popular with expedition teams who needed a vehicle that could handle both daily comfort and genuine off-road abuse without a support crew nearby. Vehicles from this generation, run mostly stock, have completed multi-week expeditions across brutal terrain and come out the other side still driving. The chassis borrowed from the Range Rover meant the Discovery inherited nearly 2 decades of proven engineering rather than starting from a blank sheet. And that inheritance is exactly why so many first-generation Discoveries are still earning their keep on farms and in overland convoys today, long after the badge moved on to more complicated things. Number 2, the Land Rover Defender 300 TD1, 1994 to 1998. This is the engine every diesel Land Rover before it had been building toward. The 300 TDI took the toughness of the earlier TDI units and refined the cooling and injection systems without adding a single sensor a shade tree mechanic couldn't understand. With regular oil changes and a cooling system kept in check, owners and specialists report these engines routinely clearing 310,000 miles before needing serious work, and many still call it the most reliable diesel Land Rover ever fitted to a Defender. There's no engine computer to throw a fault code nobody can read. There's a fuel pump, an injector pump, and moving metal parts doing exactly what they were designed to do. That mechanical honesty is why the 300 TDI Defender became the vehicle of choice for people planning to cross a continent with no support vehicle behind them. It was never the fastest thing on this list, and it was never meant to be. It was built to start every single time in weather and terrain that would strand almost anything with a screen on the dashboard. Number 1, the Land Rover Series 3, 1971 to 1985. This is the version that proved everything the earlier series trucks promised. Land Rover built 440,000 of them, more than any other series model, and the millionth Land Rover to ever roll off the production line was a Series 3 built in 1976. The British Army alone bought around 9,000 of the heavy-duty 109-inch version. When the Camel Trophy Expedition took a fleet of Series 3 trucks into Zaire in 1983, covering close to 347,000 square miles of some of the harshest terrain on the continent, only one support vehicle failed to reach the finish line, and that was because of an accidental fire, not a mechanical breakdown. Every other truck in that convoy made it through jungle, river crossings, and equatorial heat on nothing but a simple diesel engine and an aluminum body that refused to rust. This is the Land Rover that turned built to last forever from a marketing phrase into a measurable fact. The same 1992 estimate that put 70% of every Land Rover ever built still on the road was counting trucks exactly like this one, still working decades after anyone expected them to.